52 through 52. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders. Now the betrayer has arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Am I leading a rebellion," said Jesus, "that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me, but the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man, wearing nothing but a linen garment, was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind.
I don't know if you have ever focused on trivial things. You ever focused on trivial things? This morning I was focused on trivial things. Well, it's not so trivial. I was focused on my belly. Most of you can see that from where you're sitting. You can probably see it from space. But I got out this morning, I got out a tapered shirt. And I realized I was no longer tapered that direction. And I'm going, all right, should I focus on the sermon and bringing the Word of God powerfully to the congregation, or should I focus on my buttons, which are straining? What is the trivial thing and what is the important thing? And we do this. We focus on the trivial things. And this is really what Mark is trying to tell us today when he tells us, talks to us about what God does in the Garden of Gethsemane. These people, the disciples, they were not awake. They were asleep, and they were focused on those trivial things in this world and not on the important things. The hour of God had come. The hour of Jesus Christ had come, and they were focused on their rest, how much sleep they could get. And so today, as we look through this, we want to see how we can stay awake. I'm looking at you, Ken Martin. How we can stay awake. That's right. That's the name of the title. Go with it. Put it into practice. As we focus in on this, we need to know that we should be awake and watchful and waiting for what God is doing in our lives. Jesus comes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and this is a picture of the garden as it looks today. Nice paths, nice wall around the outside. You can see some of these amazing old trees here. This is a tree back here. If I can, where's my thing? There it is. Right here, this is a tree. And you can see people here. This is about a 6-foot person. This must be about a 20-foot tree. I don't know. It's huge across the base there. They get amazingly old. Gethsemane means oil press. They took the olives and they squeezed them and burned the olive oil in their lamps, and they used it for food, and they used it a lot of different ways. And this was one of Jesus' favorite places to go and pray. This is where Jesus liked to be alone. He took his disciples there and he went to pray because he knew that his hour was coming. And he wanted to be ready. And the only way he knew to be ready was to go and talk to God about it. Jesus takes Peter and James and John with him a little ways away. Jesus had given them was giving them a chance to back up their words. In the previous chapters, previous verses, he has said, they have said, oh, we'll follow you to the death. We will die for you. We will be there all the days, we're going to be there. Nobody else will follow you, but we'll follow you. Well, now he's giving them a chance to back up their words, to pray with him for an hour or two. These three disciples have witnessed amazing things, including the transfiguration. They have seen Jesus in all of his glory, and now they're going to see Jesus in all of his agony. Except they didn't. They fell asleep. We want to break up this chapter into two parts today, really two major parts. There's a couple of minor ones. And the first one is the Gethsemane of Jesus, and then we're going to talk about the Gethsemane of the disciples. Because if we look at how Mark has structured this, there is a whole lot more about the disciples in this chapter, in these verses, than there is about Jesus. Well, let's look at what Jesus did in these verses. Mark uses a word here to talk about Jesus' agony, and it is the strongest word that he can find to talk about the pain that Jesus was in, the psychological pain that he was in. The rest of the Gospels, if you read the other Gospels, they don't even mention it, or they use a much milder word, but Mark really hammers it home that Jesus was in horror of what was going to happen to him. We see Jesus' psychological suffering before his physical suffering, and oftentimes that waiting can be more intense, can be more painful than the actual event itself. We see Jesus who is grieved with a sorrow unto death. This is how close he was. This is what kind of agony he was in. Jesus doesn't enter his suffering stoically. Do you know that word? Is that a word that we use in our vocabulary? Stoically. That means, with a stiff upper lip. That means, he's all bottled up inside. That means that he's not showing any emotion. But Jesus doesn't do that. The Stoics, that philosophy came from the Greeks. Jesus enters his grief, enters his agony biblically. And biblically means, one, he falls on the ground. He is in torment. He can't even stand. His feet won't even hold him up. In the Jewish lament, which Jesus follows here, the Jews oftentimes, and you can read these in the Psalms, complained to God, screamed at God. They were uncontrolled. They were not bound by politeness when they talked to God, when they were in this kind of grief. In a rush of emotion, in this complaint, even recrimination. Do you ever blame God? Do you ever go in prayers and say, God, why in the world are you doing this to me? Why are you allowing this to happen? Jesus did. Believers poured out their hearts to God as we read the psalm.